Hello and welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm your host, Vanessa, and I'm joined by...
Myself, TK, your wonderful co-host.
Thanks for introducing yourself, TK. So today we wanted to talk about the topic of power, presence, and leadership mindset.
Definitely important topic for leaders, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we wanted to put a particular flavor on it. So I just wanted to ask a question, which is, have you ever walked into a room of senior leaders and suddenly felt maybe small? Or maybe you've been in leadership and you're in a role and suddenly you feel like, oh, I need to really assert my authority, even if it's subtly. I'm just wondering, like, have you had that situation ever, TK?
Well, I guess the correct question would be if I ever not had this situation happen to me, because that happens to me all the time. Is it okay if I tell you a bit of a story, Vanessa?
Oh,
I don't know if I told you the story about when I worked in an investment bank and there was a situation with putting a shirt on.
No.
No? Okay, well, let's go, right? So I remember way back when I had a situation where on a Friday, and it was quite a heat wave of 40 degrees. And I was supposed to, with a team I was working with, meet a very senior leader in an investment bank. I was extremely hot. And I didn't take shorts. I took some nice linen trousers and a wonderful, quite expensive actually, linen polo. And as the Friday was nearing, I was sitting with the team and everyone was really, dressed up for the occasion. And I felt excruciatingly underprepared and underdressed. Thankfully, Canary Wharf has enough stores for me to go out and buy a wonderful white shirt, which I still have, a nice shirt. I probably overpaid for it, but I felt prepared. Having said that, what happened is, there was another person visiting the room at this time, which was another actually reasonably senior person that worked in another building, worked in tech, and they came in shorts and a t-shirt. Oh, what a sight it was for this wonderful leader, how uncomfortable they felt and how small they felt because they were underdressed. They were like mentioning it every 2 minutes, and people didn't necessarily care. Or did they? But this maybe was a bit of a show. I was very happy I got this wonderful shirt, and I was really feeling it for this poor guy that came in a t-shirt and shorts because it was a casual Friday. So that's my story.
I was just thinking how fascinating, because had you have kept in your shorts and t-shirt...
Oh, no, it was trousers and polo. Come on, Vanessa.
Okay, sorry. Trousers and polo. But I'm just wondering whether...
How would I have felt, yeah.
Or how would the two of you align? Would there have felt some safety in numbers kind of thing?
Well, we would definitely be in a minority, but that's maybe not a perfect example, but definitely an example of how these things manifest. And throughout my life, I've seen it quite a lot with myself and others too.
Right. And so I wanted to share an example that happened to me just yesterday, actually, because I was in I was facilitating a women's leadership development program, and someone was talking, and when they were describing about how when they go into a room with senior leaders, if they're really senior, then they will be kind of like assessing whether they should speak up or shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And when they were using their hands, and they had their so one hand was above the other, and being a coach, you ask the question like, what's that signaling?
What's happening?
Yeah. And as she kind of unfolded this signal, she was saying, well, they're in the one above and I'm below. And I'm like, wow, what does that tell us? And it's really, so I just keep getting little flirts this week about this idea of one up and one down. And, what that really kind of gives us as an insight in terms of leadership. And, just what surprises me, I suppose, is in the conversation that we're having in this group, how many of us, including myself and the other facilitator, are regularly kind of going, where am I positionally in relation to somebody else? And do I need to bring something or hold back on something based on where I think I am? Like, it feels
Uh,
kind of shocking for me. Like, now I'm aware, I'm just like, oh, it's everywhere.
it is. And what I find interesting, Vanessa, is I actually think hmm, it's an element of human nature. I mean, okay, so I always try to explore various phenomena that I can see in the world, as in if they're productive and why are they happening. And I think this particular one, which we are observing and it's happening all the time, is perfectly natural in very many cultures. Dare I say, for the majority of people in the world, this is perfectly natural. But the big question is it productive? Is it serving us? Is it something that we want to do if we have a choice to do it or not?
Right. And, my off the cuff would be, I don't think it's productive, because I think we're putting in a lot of effort into determining, am I safe, am I not, and discerning that, versus authentically leading. And I think for me, the piece around this is so. I shared with you earlier, I came across this guy Terry Real,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about, so we know in leadership that emotional, social, and relational intelligence is really important for how we lead and building those skills. And so this aspect of relational life, and if we look at what's the emotion that sits underneath the need to kind of either be up or down,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about contempt. And contempt is one of those things. Sometimes, if we're working with a team, wouldn't we? We'd be looking at what are the behaviors that are a bit toxic, and contempt would be one of those. But
Yes.
I've always thought of contempt as this kind of like tutting or eye rolling, or like like the grandiose side of it. But what I'd never appreciated, which he was saying, was that actually shame is also a form of contempt, but it's just turned inwards. So this feeling of unworthiness, smallness, hesitance to speak is actually, if you put shame and grandiosity on a continuum, it's the same thing. So if I'm feeling superior, I'm kind of upping and puffing up myself. And that's my contempt turned outwards. Whereas if I'm feeling shame and small and less than, it's contempt turned inwards. And both of those are barriers to healthy leadership. And because they kind of stop real connection and inclusion. And so I'm curious, like what comes up for you when, I'm sharing this.
There's two things. I think, first, I would like to maybe, so I'll address the contempt angle, but there's one I wanted to address before, which is, I think, inexplicably tied to patriarchy. Actually, it's also tied to matriarchy, but I think these structures are what I would call the economy of respect. So, for instance, if you look at like a very classical patriarchal structure, like, I don't know, a crime organization, for instance, in a very traditional culture, like, I don't want to say Italy or Japan, not that I've been in a crime organization in these countries, but what I can imagine, what I dream up is, well, I guess based on fantasy and novels, is that all these people really care about respect, and this is like a currency they trade. Everyone gets respect based on their position in the organization, obviously a pyramid. And based on that, obviously, maybe for them, at least in terms of like, obviously there's a violence involved and so on. But the thing is, maybe it's not about being in contempt and shame and grandiosity. It's being in a structure that, you get the level of respect that's aligned to you, and then obviously you can progress or not. So that's I guess, it can be very unproductive, because obviously there's a implicit hierarchy and patriarchy. I can imagine there's different social structures based on matriarchy that can be quite similar to that. So there's one angle, once it can manifest. But I think your major point was about this contempt to yourself, which places you, but in the structures I've talked about before, the position is explicit, right? Everyone knows who's the lieutenant boss or whatever they're called. But in this situation, you walk into a room and you try to position yourself based on, either you express grandiosity because you contempt others, so you elevate yourself, or you unfortunately put yourself down. And what I think, as you've said that, is the first time I've heard it, it's actually tough because you always see these. Once you unravel something like this particular concept, at least for me, you see it within yourself, and you can, if you can reflect, which I'm sure our wonderful listeners can too, and as they hear these concepts, I'm sure they are thinking about these situations for themselves. But what I will say is, for me, it's just difficult to think that there's so much contempt I can be holding for either myself and others. And, it's not something I want to have. And yet sometimes, sadly, it does come naturally. So it's interesting when you walk into this situation where this actually starts manifesting. That's a big one.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's part of it's conditioning, isn't it? Where we're compared, we're contrasted, are we getting the A? All those kind of things come into it. So I just want to go back to something that you said, because I don't want to lose it. You said the economy of respect.
Yes.
And in my head, I think, oh my gosh, I'd love to read a book about the economy of respect. Because I think
I have to write one, or maybe we should both do it. It's a new thing I've invented.
Because I think, we might use, for example, with a team, the tool like the drama triangle.
Yes.
And the whole thing about, not getting involved in drama is the key is respect, self-respect, respect of others, and I think respect is such an important thing. And I love where you point us to in terms of, I might get esteem from the hierarchy, from, my expertise, whatever, but that's all outside in. And I think where this really points to is, if we are in this kind of outside in for power, the perspective is always, that something might happen and that might validate me. Therefore, I get, I get more self-respect or not. But the place that I think is the one to look is, how actually do I tap into that power within myself, that we are all human, and my worth comes from my humanity and our shared humanity. And therefore, if I can really accept that, then what does that bring for my leadership? When I am noticing those situations where actually, I'm in that pattern again of one up, one down. And so that might mean in a conversation, if I'm one up, I might dominate, and I might not really listen, or I might think, that's a stupid idea. Or if I'm one down, I might be kind of, as I gave in the example, assessing whether it's okay to challenge or to speak up or to bring a new idea. So it's kind of like, for me, if I can really be in that place of embracing my authenticity, my unique strength, and also my human flaws, then maybe I can show up as an even better leader.
Yes, and I think, as you were saying this, what I've been contemplating while capturing and listening to these situations that you've described is it even achievable? And what happens when you actually really try to focus on your own self-worth so much that maybe you disregard others? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I think if we who really focus on ourselves, focus on our strengths, there's also a bit of a danger associated with it, at least from my point of view. We can probably see these people, sadly or not sadly, depending on your political views. Let's look at things happening in the world right now. There's a certain person in the White House, and there's another person close to that person standing behind a desk with their son. So Musk and Trump, Trump and Musk. And they're a particular pair. Whatever your political views are, I personally believe that these kinds of people, whatever you want to attribute to them, don't necessarily, even if they have contempt towards others in terms of grandiosity, which probably there is plenty you can find, they probably don't necessarily worry about what other people think about them as much. At least Musk. Trump does, probably. Not that I know him that much. But the interesting thing I wanted to mention is I would love to focus on my wonderful brilliance and give myself all the respect I'm owned as a human being with, all the wonderful things I do. But then again, maybe it would lead me, and it would also lead other listeners and leaders doing that to, self-aggrandizing, not from the perspective of contempting others in the room, contempting others that are collaborating, thinking less of them, but actually not thinking about them at all. And that's the big thing, because I do believe that as a leader, we need to notice the other human beings, and we need to acknowledge the impact we're having on them and they are having on us. And unfortunately, it will lead us to this perpetual imbalance of, as you say, contempt.
Well, I think you're talking about narcissism.
Well, I guess so, but it's pushing to it's pushing to the extreme, isn't it? Right? I think these can be treated. Musk came out as on the spectrum. Trump is someone that many classify as a narcissist. It's obviously there, but when you think about that, if you want to disconnect yourself from the opinions of others, you are pushing yourself into the spectrum, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean. I feel like we've gone to an extreme,
okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that, But what I'm
so let's talk about what does it look like when it's not extreme, right? Maybe I'm thinking about it too much.
Yeah, no. So I think it's really interesting, and so for me, there's that with our listeners in mind. So let's assume our listeners are leaders in organizations, and so a big part of their work is really creating psychological safety, so people can show up, be themselves, say when they screw up,
my favorite topic, yes,
right. So if that's the kind of perspective that we're holding, then if as leaders we are all aware of when we are either up, so the exercise that Terry has is, he says, just for 2 weeks, notice, and all you do is notice if you are up or down, in relation to other people. And I kind of think I love that, because it's like, it's noticing the pattern. Oh, there I am again. Oh, there, And so for me, this is about awareness, and really kind of saying, okay, if we want to be great as a team, then we really need to lean into our resourcefulness, and we really need to allow for individual brilliance to come together collectively. And I feel like if we can do that in that perspective, then it encourages more psychological safety. We can say like, oh, we notice there are marginalized voices. Like, some people haven't spoken yet. What are your thoughts on this? We can do it in a way that doesn't expose them.
Okay, so that's interesting, because Terry's example is reflect internally.
Right.
But what you, I think, turned it into, which I really love, and I try to do if I am in a good spot, and I can see that I'm not alone doing that, hearing it from you, is noticing what is happening in the room. In fact, that's our job as coaches, as team and relationship coaches, to notice that. It may be hard, and you probably remember when you were learning that, as I remember, to be learning that. The person that, and I really had a problem trying to spot that, trying to spot the, as we call it, the emotional field. And I remember having a supervisor, very experienced mentor coach, telling me to actually watch TV shows and try to figure out the emotional relationship and these up and downs in there, to practice it. And it came with time. But it's interesting that you said that as leaders, we should be spotting it and pointing it out. You're absolutely right. But the big question is, how do you get there? Terry
Yeah.
says that notice it for yourself. But then what next?
Right. Well, and I suppose if I go back to my example, so actually for me in coach training, that wasn't a difficulty area. Like that was a natural strength for me
Love
because
it.
in my family of origin, that's what I did all the time. Was, like,
Ah,
oh, these dynamics is like walking on eggshells. Oh, like, who do I need to be? And what I saw in these women were a lot of that going on, like, oh, I can sense this. Oh, but no voice of that because it's all internalized.
yeah.
So it's like I mean, thank you for sharing. Like that was we've all got different growth edges, haven't we, around the work. And I love that you bring that so vulnerably here. um because it's a skill that we can learn to check in. And I just think so often with this work we're doing it, the relational side of it can seem so fluffy and
Hmm.
ethereal, but actually, it's the key piece, I think, in my opinion, to doing, great work together and thriving together. Is the relational, how are we relating to each other? Are we losing loads of time in drama because we're playing these power games under the surface that we've got no idea that we're playing? And if we can just start to, rather than judge it, kind of notice it and bring some light to it, then we can find a way to do it better together.
I guess the big question then is, as though we could probably spend hours here agreeing, and I'm sure that many of our listeners would probably see the same perspective. I would like to encourage us and our listeners to think about, okay, so think about this particular leader that all of us know, and there might be many that would never be capable of doing that, that would never be capable of reflecting on it, of calling it out like that. And okay, maybe I'm going extreme again, right? I don't want to point fingers at the current US president, but um, it's our job, Vanessa, to help them, but maybe it's also our listeners' job to bring some of it to the world. So what's our advice to help people change things, right? Because just them, us knowing that, and our listeners knowing that, is probably not enough. This needs
Yeah.
to change somehow, or maybe it would
Yeah.
be better if it did.
Well, yeah. And it's very easy to go to the, oh, that's so hopeless because it's so impossible. But I think, so this brings me to where I see my work. And I work mainly with women, and I really see my work is helping women to rise. And as part of that, it's seeing this internalized shame that we sometimes have, or contempt for ourselves that we sometimes have, and then saying, right, okay, now you're aware of it, how do I level up? How do I stop pedestaling people and then editing myself and overworking the relationship, versus accepting my authenticity, embracing that, and having the courage to take the risk to show up in the ways that I feel and discern are safe for me to do so. And I think, my colleague was saying that a lot yesterday, because I was kind of going down the line of, okay, well, it's about agency and it's about advocating. And my colleague is in Canada, and she's like, yeah, and in the US in particular,
Mhm.
there is a question of discernment. Is this really safe for me to do right now?
Yeah, that's the dangerous time that people might find themselves in, sadly. And but who I find myself working with is I do work a lot with line managers, either ones that have just started or the ones that have been doing this thing for years, and organizations find themselves, sending them to me to help them be better. And my advice, if you're a listener, which you're listening to us, so you are, is just like if you notice it for yourself and you start doing this thing, if you start calling it out, and if you start acting on what you see, the world will start changing around you in smaller, but then bigger and bigger circles around your mind, around your desk. And it doesn't change all at once, but it changes with one single person, one single step. Be the change you want to see in the world, no matter how small it is. You doing that makes a difference. Even if for you it's imperceptible, people will see and people will take notice.
I love that. It also makes me think about, I want to share one more thing, which is there is an exercise that we do in this program, and it is asking people to speak from their heart and tell a really short story from their heart. And the connection that creates when people speak from their heart about, and in this instance, it's something that shaped them as a leader, or in their life. And they tell these stories that, like, wow, you're just like, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
It creates such connection and such intimacy and, trust. And so for me, that kind of reminding myself that leadership isn't about controlling power. It really is about how do we create space for others to step in and be at their best. How do we really do that? And how do we enable them or support them to speak from their truth, their heart, and paying more attention to the relational side, because I think the habit is to pay attention to the task, the results, the outcomes. And I just think if we can move 1 degree more towards the relational, it will really support even better results.
I would agree with you, but I always ask myself the question, why is it the way it is right now? What has made it evolve in this particular way? Because only when we understand the systemic reasons that got us there, we can then try to make the change sustainable, and I'm not saying permanent, but possibly taking root a bit more. And, as I was listening to Terry and his wonderful thoughts, it's all about, like, sadly, again, patriarchy and big men leaders being socialized in a certain way, with a cult of results, the cult of competency, the rejection of the connection with what you would call the heart, the emotional side, the relationship side, as something unmanly. Then, because many leadership positions, senior leadership, are highly male dominated, it then attracts women that have to feel like they have to emulate it.
Yeah.
And this becomes a pervasive culture of leadership, and then everyone emulates it because they want to be in these positions of power, wealth, respect, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever rocks your boat. So we have created this. And, it's interesting, to be honest, Rebecca, Vanessa, I think that when I look at the world nowadays, we had a moment when we went into, and there were moments throughout the 20th century before and so on, because it's all a giant circle, isn't it, of history, when as humanity, we were turning into our emotional, softer side, the heart. Sadly, when I look at the world nowadays, it's going the other way, which saddens me really, because it obviously isn't balanced. And that's a big challenge. So for me, it's all about, if you want to create a space that has more of this, as you say, a notch into the relationship, emotional intelligence space, and you're in the environment that's not this, you have to show even more vulnerability and you have to be even stronger to be able to do that. But it's
Mm,
such a wonderful thing if you do.
I love that. So, what would you, if we were to make this really pragmatic and
Mhm.
practical for people, what would you suggest that would help them move towards that? Yeah, big inhale.
No, because I'm talking about it all the time, Vanessa. That's the challenge. So I don't want to like plug in, but it's a so you might have
What's the
seen
first
me.
step? What's
Well,
the first
okay.
step?
So have real conversation with people. Um, Focus on connections. I call them sincere conversations, right? As a leader, really take the time to build a relationship with the people that are looking up to you for leadership in a way that you're not afraid to show respect, vulnerability, and have a real and sincere conversation, please. And if you want to know more, follow my LinkedIn profile.
Okay. And do you know, I noticed that it's that in what you said, people that are looking up to you. And it's like,
Yes.
well, maybe the start of that conversation is, are you looking up? And what's the impact of that on your behaviors? And how does that, impact your productivity and your ability to move in the direction that you want for yourself? Maybe that's a starting point.
That's a good point, right? And but maybe raises a more fundamental issue because I use this term quite deliberately, right? It's like I hate saying under, but what I've seen is, and I'm wondering what you think about that, Vanessa. Sometimes we just feel like we really want to look up to someone for
Oh,
leadership, right? Yeah, we really would love it. I can hear
so
how we all
yucky.
long from
Sorry.
this,
Oh,
right? It's just
yeah.
like, would there be someone that will take my hand in this dangerous and
Yeah.
difficult
Rescue
time that
it. Yeah.
I mean, not even rescuers. It's like someone would even, would smile to me when I feel down, right? Someone that could show me the way, say, hey, TK, that's fine, right? This is the way you do it. Here's a gift for you. Here's the path that you can follow. It will be okay. You're great. A coach, someone, right? That's what I mean by looking up. Looking for someone that can be a guide, an inspiration, a helper, a kind person. We all need them, don't we?
Yeah, and I wonder if that is the up is the bit that's confusing it, right? So
It doesn't
it's
have to
like
be this direction.
exactly. It could be in any direction, right? It's
It
like
is
what I
true.
hear you saying is sometimes I need emotional support. Sometimes I need connection and a safe place to go. And and that is part of what, helps me thrive. And I think, I'm hearing like great leaders can do the mentoring, which is that whole guiding thing. They can do the coaching, they can be agile in what is needed for where someone is. But I think the challenge sometimes is that when we get stuck in this groove of this is how I do leadership and I
Mm.
just tell people what to do or I show them the way and inadvertently we take away power from people because they might show up in this space of like, oh, this is really painful and this is really
Rescue
hard
me.
and shit, just tell me. Yeah. And they go, yeah, of course I'll tell you.
There you go,
and,
right?
and then we're in this, codependency. And so
Oh, yeah.
I, yeah, I love all these conversations. So where I want to take it back to is I think the thing for leaders is to really like have some curiosity around how is power showing up in our dynamics, with my colleagues, with my peers, with my boss, how is it showing up? And if I'm aware of how that is, what's happening in relationship, where I'm giving my power away, where I'm inadvertently taking it from someone, then we have that chance to equalize and to be really inclusive and diverse in, kind of gathering skills from all around us rather than this traditional hierarchy, which drives me crazy. And it drives me crazy in that whole how we give our power away. I saw this thing with Reese
Mm-hmm.
Witherspoon, and it was like a little thing on Instagram, and she was basically saying, there's so many times in movies where something horrific is about to happen, and then the woman turns to the guy and she goes, oh, what should we do? And it's like, oh, right. And it's so that's probably part of the reaction that you're hearing in
The
me at
culture.
the
No,
moment.
no, no.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
I understand the
It's
cultural story
part
we're
of the
telling ourselves,
culture.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so
And
awful.
it's like, and they show all these clips of movies and you just think, oh, this is part of, this socialization. It's just annoying. So, because once you're aware of it, you can't not see it. So for me, the invitation is, as a leader, a reflection that you might have with yourself is what are some of the power dynamics around me, and what is my part in that, and how might I, you know, um, be the change, exactly as you said, how might I be the change within this environment to create more safety, even more safety and more contribution by, really equalizing some of these power dynamics that are underneath the surface and we're not talking to or not thinking about. I'll get
But
off my
is there
soapbox
no, no,
now.
no, 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 no? I like your soapbox. Absolutely. I love what you shared, but there's another, I think, side to it, which I wanted to highlight, possibly as we're nearing to the end of our episode, which is, I know I'm going to all these extremes, but it's a great example you gave, right? Of and I don't really want to disassociate it from the example of the women. Was it damsel in distress? I really want to, but there will be situations that you, our listeners, as leaders, you will be in this particular scene, this particular circumstance, when someone is coming to you with vulnerability, giving you the power, right? Saying, "Help me. I'm there. I seek your guidance." And really don't have the picture of the damsel in distress in this time, because I think what's needed is to be, I think, a productive, a good leader is to handle it with care. Handle this offer, this ask for help, this gift of power with vulnerability that someone gives you, with care, and not outright reject it because it might hurt the person saying that. The person comes to you giving you the authority, asking for your guidance and advice, placing themselves, as Vanessa said, under, because it might even be hard for them to do so. And I think, we need to be mindful that it also puts a responsibility on us as leaders to handle it with care. We can't take it and be proud of ourselves, I think, because obviously it will diminish the value of the wonderful contribution people bring, right? It's not about taking away the decisions from people. We all want the people that look to the side to us for leadership to grow. But on the other hand, we also don't want to reject it because it might cause a feeling of fear and being lost from a person that wanted help by showing that they give us the power, and it's just the moment when we need to show care. This is this particular moment when you need to think about yourself as a leader and think about the other person saying that.
And I want to bring us full circle to when we started. I introduced this by saying this was about, leadership mindset, presence, and power. And so, just to fully kind of close that loop, what we're saying here, I think, is that when we are present as leaders, we're not making assumptions that someone, can't resolve something for themselves. We're not, kind of diving in and rescuing. We are holding that person as resourceful and being curious with, what's showing up for them right now.
Mm.
And so when we can have that presence, we hold space for each other, and our brilliance and our resourcefulness. And out of that, we can create amazing results. And there may well be times where you need an expert opinion, and that's different to when someone is trying to figure something out and not clear in their thinking and needing a partner or someone to guide them. But I think the key to this is if we have presence and we have that self-awareness about the power dynamic that we may have been running either consciously or unconsciously, we can then choose how to meet people in, where they are, rather than just acting out our own stuff.
That's the thing, right? To be able to lead, you have to lead yourself first and be able to
Yeah.
create the space for yourself to be your best self, to be able to do these things for others. And I can only wish that more people would be able to do that. But as our wonderful listener, I'm sure you are spending the time with us, listening to our reflections, having your own. So you're definitely on the right path.
Thank you for listening.